In this video, I'm going to focus on the force types that you need to know, as well as their definitions. What is a force? I would define it as a push or pull that acts on an object and by an agent. An object is who or what a force acts on, whereas an agent is who or what is applying the force. There are 5 force types that you need to know. They're listed in the white box at the bottom of your screen if you want to make a list. Know that there are more than 5 force types in the universe, but at this level of physics, we're going to really dive deeply into 5 of them and master those, and then in future physics classes, we can open up more. Our first force is gravitational force. This is also known as weight. Those are interchangeable terms. As variable options, you can go with Fg, force gravity, or W for weight. I'm going to talk through every force as being a push or a pull. In this case, we have a pulling force. The Earth will always pull you downward and never push you away. I'll also talk through every force as being contact or non-contact. In this case, we have a non-contact force. You do not need to touch the Earth's surface for it to affect you. Direction is towards the center of the mass that causes the gravitational field. Now, primarily this will be Earth, but it doesn't have to be. A lot of students like to say that the direction of this force is downward, and in most cases, you'll be correct. For the person on the North Pole, a downward force of gravity makes sense. But what about for this person on the side of the planet? I don't think a downward force of gravity is going to be very helpful. So if you're ever zoomed out, just make sure that you're sending the force of gravity towards the center of the mass that causes the gravitational field. Our second force is normal force. This is caused by surfaces, typically a flat surface like a floor or a table. Variable options, you've got Fn, force normal, or just capital N. Surfaces push you away, and you must touch a surface for it to affect you. Direction is away from the surface and perpendicular to that surface. An example, I have a box resting on a horizontal table. I'm adding in a green line to represent the surface itself, and the orange vector represents the force. Notice that the force is away from the green line and perpendicular to it. If we put the box on an angled surface, notice that the force is still perpendicular to the green line and away from it. Our third force is tension force. This is caused by things that can have tension, and if there's too much tension, they could snap, things like ropes and strings and chains. Variable options, you've got Ft, force tension, or capital T. This is a pulling force. You can only pull someone towards you with a rope. You can't push them away, and you must touch a rope for it to affect you. Direction is along the line of the rope and away from the object. I like this tug of war example as proof of that. Here we have 2 people using ropes tied to a box, and they're pulling in their respective directions. Notice that the tension forces they apply are along the line of their respective ropes and away from the object in the middle. Kinetic friction is the first of our 2 friction forces. This is sometimes referred to as sliding friction. It's the friction for moving objects. So we're looking for things that are actually moving with respect to the surface they're touching. Variable options, you have a few. I think Fk is the primary one, force kinetic. Friction has a way of pulling backwards, slowing an object down, and it's a contact force. You must touch the surface for it to apply friction. Direction is 2 things, parallel to the surface that causes it and opposite the direction of motion. If we have this box sliding to the right across a tabletop, notice that friction is opposite the direction of motion and parallel to the surface. If it's on an angled ramp, again we have friction opposite the direction of motion and parallel to the surface. Static friction is our other frictional force. This is the friction for stationary objects, so we're looking for no motion between the object and the surface it's touching. Fs, force static, is the primary variable. Just like our other friction, we'll go with pull and contact. It is still parallel to the surface, but now it's opposite what's known as intended motion. I'll give you an example. Here we have a person using a rope to attempt to pull a box to the left. So the intention is to pull it left. That's what it would do with no friction at all. But let's say the box is too heavy and it doesn't move. Well, something would be keeping it to the right. In this case, that would be static friction. It's opposite the intention to the left, and it's parallel to the surface. Maybe there's a box resting on an inclined ramp. Its intention is to slide down and right. That's what it would do with no friction. But something's keeping it up and left since it's sitting still. This would be static friction again, parallel to the surface and opposite the intention of down and right. Just know that if there is no intended motion, then there is no static friction. The object must be trying to move in order for static friction to keep it in place. You may also run into some miscellaneous forces. These would be forces that are not in the list of 5 that we previously discussed. If you notice one of those, call it F for force, and then just put the subscript as the agent. Maybe it's a foot kicking a box, just call it F foot. Maybe it's a man pushing a box, call it F man. Just focus on whatever's causing the force.